Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hello and welcome to all the viewers in today's religious dialogue. Today's discussion is inshallah about the topic of autism. What is autism and how it affects the families and the parents who have autistic children? And as communities, how can we better support those parents and support children with autism? Joining me for today's discussion, we have with us the Honorable Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin, Samahat Sayyid Mohammad Razavi, who is the head of the Religious Advisory Board at the Shia Islamic Education Society in London, where the Sayyid receives and resolves family-related matters. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and the sister and all those who are watching our program all over the world.
Thank you very much, Sayyid. Lovely to see you this week. Dear viewers, joining us as guest of the week, we have with us Dr. Yasmin Mohsin. She's an adolescent psychiatrist, and she is also working in the NHS and training in therapeutic skills and has an interest in Islamic models of mental health. Salamun alaikum, Sister Yasmin. Thank you so much for joining us in today's program and taking out of your very busy schedule to be with us.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you both. Nice to be here. Nice to join everyone.
Of course, this is an important topic and it's increasingly becoming more and more important because we are seeing more and more children with autism in our communities and in our societies at large. To start off, before we try to understand how to parent an autistic child and as communities, how we can support these parents and these children, I think it's important for the viewers and myself to understand what exactly is autism. Is it a disease? Is it a recognized disease that we should look for treatments for? And how do he describe autism?
So I think it's changing and over time. So the ideas that people had what autism is a few decades ago is quite different to the ideas today, and I'm sure it will change in the future. Before, it used to be seen as just a severe illness or impairment, and now we're talking about neurodiversity as just different types of people and personalities. So neurodiversity means like a difference in the way and structure of the brain and how people are wired, how they think. I think the term is being used so that we move away from thinking of it as a disease and more as a difference in the way people think, because essentially that's what it is. It just means people think differently, and it can have pros and cons, as with anything in life. So that's the current terminology being used. There's also neurodivergence, but that's quite similar in meaning. But neurodiversity means like the terms of diversity and embracing diversity as we do currently in society, or trying to in society, in terms of ethnic differences, religious differences. So it means a diversity in that way as well.
Sure. So let's unpack this a little bit. How are the autistic children neurologically different to other children who we perceive as normal?
Sure. So we're talking about differences, but these differences are not always kind of visible on imaging. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. There are certain brain areas. It's a very complicated condition, and it's a very like wide-ranging condition as well. And so that's why we now talk about ASD, or autistic spectrum disorder, rather than just saying autism now, because that kind of encompasses the variety of the presentations, and also that's the variety in terms of what's going on biologically, but also the difficulties that they're experiencing or the strengths that they're experiencing. So it is a spectrum. It's a massive spectrum, and people can have a few traits. They can have severe conditions, they can have mild conditions, they might not know it, people might not notice it. So it's very, very varied. And that's why it's better now to use the term spectrum, although some people would still prefer to say that they have autism. So it's also down to the individual. So sometimes you can see changes, but sometimes it's not clear what the cause is. And in our field of work, it's also quite difficult to differentiate it from trauma. So we might say somebody looks like they have features of autism, but actually they've experienced trauma in their upbringing, so that can make it look like it, and we find it quite difficult to sometimes diagnose between the two. Obviously someone can have both as well, but it just shows how complex it is. I mean, sometimes it is obvious, sometimes it's very complicated, and many different causes, many different things going on as well, which I'll talk about in a bit.
Thank you. If I bring in the Sayyid at this point, Sayyid, why are religious scholars not addressing these topics? Because clearly we see a lot of parents now struggling with autism, and our communities just don't know how to deal with children who look different to other children who we perceive as normal. So why are scholars not addressing these issues from the member, and what responsibility do they have to educate the public in this regard?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very good question, and I would also ask the scholars why they are not discussing and addressing this question when Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, in his letter to Malik Ashtar, has very openly and clearly discussed this matter and has advised Malik Ashtar to not to ignore people. And what is amazing in the letter of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam in regards to the disabled members of our society, that he recognizes there are people who are visibly disabled and there are people who are invisibly disabled. And nowadays I've noticed in public places that there is a sign written in front of the disabled toilet that there might be some people who would be using the toilet who may not look disabled, but they are disabled and they need this toilet. So people should not object some people using the toilet for as a disabled person. So Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam, when addressing this issue, he said there are people in our society who are uh, in a lower stage of understanding than us, and we have a responsibility and duty towards them, and ulama have the responsibility and duty to educate people, as you mentioned, from member and about them. Especially nowadays we are increasingly witnessing people living longer. I mean, the disability is not restricted to only mental issues, but also to old age issues as well. And many of the elderly who become old, they lose the capability of communicating, talking, or discussing their needs the way they used to be able to discuss during their youthhood. So we have a big responsibility. So Imam Ali, in this letter to Malik Ashtar, first of all divides them in many different categories, the disabled people. One of them he recognizes al-Bu'sa. Al-Bu'sa are the people who are mentally or psychologically ill and they need attention, special attention. And ahl zamani, and these are the people who are uh, bound to earth. I mean, they are stranded in one place and they cannot move themselves. Then he goes further and discusses and says that out of the necessity, some of these people become beggars and dependent and burden on the society, and others are able to somehow survive and go through the difficulties of life. So he advises Malik Ashtar that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allocated a specific portion of Baytul Mal for the care of these people. And if the amount that has been allocated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the care and for the care of these people should not be abused, should not be used elsewhere, and should not be neglect. The needs of these people in the society should not be neglected. So Imam Ali is very clear from this point of view, that he recognizes both visible disabilities and invisible disabilities.
Thank you, Sayed. Dr. Yasmin, of course, when a parent the parents have autistic children born to them, this kind of diagnosis, or this kind of a child comes in their lives unannounced and brings in a lot of shock. Since we are talking about how to parent an autistic child, what does it look like to have an autistic child in one's life? What are the difficulties that these parents have to experience? What does autism look like from a parent's view?
Sure. So, just to say, mashallah, thank you, Sayyidina, for pointing out the sheer wisdom that we have with Imam Ali alayhi salam, and we always forget and underestimate. And it's a really nice point about the visible and invisible illness, because that also explains a lot of autism or autistic spectrum disorders. A lot of it is visible, a lot is invisible. So sometimes parents might not know what they're dealing with. They don't know why their child is so distressed. Sometimes they do, sometimes it can be a visible disability. But sometimes there's a term called masking, and that happens in maybe more where people don't necessarily have the full condition of autism. We just say ASD, or they are more high functioning, they have higher intellects that can mask and make up and compensate, or girls. So girls are, subhanallah, biologically wired to be more sociable, and sometimes in some ways more intelligent, not to be controversial, but girls are able to often compensate or mask, and so for them it can be more of an invisible illness than for boys, and that's why we see that nowadays the rates are increasing in girls, and I'm not saying that there aren't things that are causing increased rates of autism, but it's more that we're seeing the autism more, we're understanding it more. So before, it wouldn't be obvious in girls, it wouldn't be obvious in people who are able to mask or compensate better. It would just be a diagnosis for boys with a severe condition, the visible part of the illness. But now we're seeing a lot more of the invisible illness, and we're understanding it a lot more. So before, maybe the girls would present with social anxiety or be diagnosed with other conditions which are ultimately caused by the autism. We'll go into some of the consequences of having autism, but those parts would get picked up rather than the underlying condition. So it may be that parents see that their child is very anxious and they don't know why, or they get help for them and it's just diagnosed as anxiety, social anxiety, separation anxiety, but actually that's because of the issues that autism is causing, or the ASD is causing. So things that they might see, often you see a lot of tantrums, and that's partly because of the communication aspects of ASD. So generally we say that there are three core features of autism. One is like a social deficit, another is communication deficit, and another is certain behaviors that they have to repeat or restrict to. So the communication aspect is where they don't always get their needs across to other people, and that can be very frustrating. So in maybe more severe autism, that can manifest as speech delay, not being able to talk, but in the more subtle versions as well, it may just be that they don't know how to explain themselves. Either way is going to be frustrating. So then the child just, it might turn into a tantrum because that's the only way that they know how to communicate, and that's the only way that parents know how to listen as well. And it's just something that develops in this pattern, and so we try and break this pattern, which I'll go into a bit more, but that could be one thing that the parents see. And another cause of tantrums is that anxiety levels might be higher. Distress about certain things might be higher, such as changes in routine. So parents don't know why their child is suddenly getting upset, but it might be something quite simple, or in their minds simple, but for the child it's not. So there can be a lot of distress, a lot of stress, anxiety, self-harm as well, because the feelings are so overwhelming. So it can result in more like physical aspects. They may see some hyperactivity as well, because genetically and in the brain as well, these two conditions are quite linked as well. So it could manifest in various ways. And as we're saying, it's a spectrum. It can be very, very different, the way that it manifests. But from the classic hand flapping and only eating like restricted amounts of food and not being able to tolerate certain noises, that can be a more obvious way, to the more subtle ways, maybe having some anxiety about certain things and getting stressed about certain things. Sorry, Sister Zainab.
No, thank you. Thank you. You've actually said given quite a lot of information here, but I would like you to a little bit, just so that we understand, because not everybody has children with autism in their homes. And I think as a community, we need to understand, what does autism look like in those parents' lives? You mentioned tantrums and meltdowns. What do these tantrums and meltdowns look like physically? And how difficult is it for parents to actually deal with these tantrums and meltdowns? How different are they to a normal child's behavior?
So it can be very varied, and so maybe like a typical child, or neurotypical now is the term, compared to a neurodivergent child. So they may be more unaware of social norms and etiquettes. So it might be more okay in their mind to just throw themselves down on the floor and have a tantrum, because there is that social awareness deficit. But again, for people who are good at masking, who are maybe a bit older, and they're able to kind of cover up, so they might not show that kind of behavior, because somehow they've understood, just by observing intellectually, okay, this behavior is not acceptable. I think culture also plays an influence as well. So what's culturally acceptable can also influence how somebody behaves. So they may get it into their mind, okay, logically this is not culturally acceptable, even if it's not innate, inherent, that there's something, it's not something that they're born with, that understanding, but they've picked it up, they've managed to, and so they kind of cover that up. So then that can be more of an internal explosion in a way, which can come out sometimes, maybe in a more socially acceptable way, but if it's too much, it might come out as a tantrum as well. So it again varies from the one extreme of a complete meltdown in public that's drawing lots of attention and causing a lot of embarrassment for the child and family, and community, or stress, to the other extreme where it's just hidden. So, and you've got all that in between. So it
And
can be
autistic
very
children who are unable to communicate effectively, can they display violence as well as a form of communication?
Yeah, absolutely. Not necessarily, but yeah, it can be, if it's the only way that their parents listen to them, or that they get their needs met. So we talk about behavior as a form of communication. So if they can't communicate verbally, then it will be through behavior, and whatever behavior that is that gets their needs met. Again, it also comes down to what is socially acceptable in their mind. If they have almost complete unawareness, then it may be things that are really unacceptable. They don't necessarily, they might not mean to hurt other people, but they just don't see things from outside of themselves. So they talk about this in terms of theory of mind. So it can be difficult sometimes for someone with autism to put themselves in somebody else's shoes, and to imagine what things are like for someone else. So violence is an example of that kind of behavior. They don't realize the impact of violence on that person because they can't feel what that person is feeling. But again, that's just one type of presentation. Somebody might not have that. They may be able to have a lot of empathy. Sorry.
Yeah. I suppose it's frustrating for those who are on the severe spectrum of autism to communicate, and so the only way is to physically display their frustrations. Said, if I bring you in here, of course, people with disabilities have been marginalized all over the world, but the essence of our religion is love. And Islam teaches us how to support those in need and who are disadvantaged. Yet we see that people who have autism and their families are marginalized in our communities. When they come to the mosque, like for example, I've had ladies who say that, uh, when we come to the mosque, the next thing we hear is, whose child is this? And we feel embarrassed and we feel like we want to hide somewhere. Uh, People are really, really not understood when they come to our communities. What do you see the solution to this, and how do we raise the level of education? Of course, you have mentioned that ulama should be speaking about this from the member, but as communities, how should we be viewing the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how tolerant we should be of children in particular?
Yes, again, I would refer to the advice Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam gives to Malik Ashtar in relation to disabled members of our society. He describes and says that our society members are some who are known openly to the people, and there are also people who are remote, who are remotely known and neglected in our society, and those are the people we should not avoid, because on the day of judgment, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allocated the means to take care of these people, will ask about them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala especially will ask the leaders, the community leaders, the country leaders, or the society leaders will be especially asked. I would say one of the openly and very clearly described place of using khums is the usage of khums for the people of our society who are remotely known. And the reason I'm using the word remote is because Imam Ali is trying to bring them forward, and he exactly understands the way you and sister were describing that people with autism or psychological issues, they don't have patience, or it is a bit difficult to understand them. So Imam Ali says, when they come to you, do not ignore them, listen to them. And he is even advising his Malik Ashtar to remove soldiers and guards, because they might be scared of them. And then Imam Ali says, these are the people, when they express, they have needs, and when they want to express themselves, they become nervous. So be patient with their nervousness. And then he says that these are the people, we have a great responsibility for them. And then he says, beware that they might become angry with you, they might lose control with you, and you should not react, you should be patient. And even if you are not able to fulfill, because he knows that some of them may be over demanding, and it may not be in your capability to uh, deal with their needs and requirements. So Imam Ali is telling Malik Ashtar, you listen to them even if you are not able to 100% sort out their problem, but be patient and listen to them and be kind to them. And at the end, uh, don't just make an excuse. Apologize to them, and say sorry to them, and tell them that, sorry, I was not able to fully uh, fulfill the responsibility in relation to you, and give them hope, so they could come back, and they should not uh, feel neglected. They should not feel as they are unwanted in the society. So our ulama and centers need to be educated, and they need to train the members of the society to especially welcome these people, because it's obvious, because the illnesses that they have are according to Imam Ali. Imam Ali was ma'soom. He is an infallible leader. He knows, he is aware of the problems and issues that they had, but the problem he had, he could not describe the issues of the society the way he wanted to. We know that he used to say, "Saluni, saluni, qabla an tafqiduni," that come and ask questions, but people were not highly educated or not aware of. They used to go and ask silly questions instead of asking solutions for such thing and solutions for other issues of the society. They used to ask irrelevant questions and neglect the knowledge they could have received from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. So we need to, and there is a hadith that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam quotes in this same advice to Malik Ashtar, and he says Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say that disabled members of the society uh, have rights, and a nation or a society which cannot fulfill their responsibility towards disabled are also known as mustaz'af in Islamic teachings. And if the members of society who are unable to take care of the disabled and mustaz'af of the society will be questioned on the day of judgment, and they will not be left alone on the day of judgment.
Thank you. Of course, you highlighted the importance as well of talking and understanding, and that brings us that, we should establish organizations that encourage this kind of inclusivity in our communities. Sister, from what the Sayyid just said, there is a question that came to my mind, and that is, oftentimes we view neurodivergent children as suffering an illness. Oftentimes, we'll not talk about autism or ADHD, thinking that we will do anything in order to remove this stigma from my child and seek a cure for this illness and disease. Is from the psychological point of view, is this the right way to view a neurodivergent child? Or what is the correct way of viewing a neurodivergent child with a typical child versus a typical child?
Thank you, and thank you, Sayed, for really good insights into, subhanallah, very, very wise leader and figure that we have, alayhi salam. And there's so much to learn from that. So much to learn, like how we could change our attitudes and everything, mashallah. And what you were saying about what Imam Ali alayhi salam was saying about listening and not just reacting, that's a massive part. So a lot of psychology, including with autism or ASD, is about understanding. And so if you can understand why that person is feeling the way they are, then you can try to address what it is, what is the problem, what it is that they're trying to communicate, but also what's going on, rather than seeing it as they're doing something bad, therefore they need to be punished. I mean, boundaries are important, so it is important to know what's acceptable and unacceptable, and we have rules in Islam, but also love and kindness and understanding are a massive part of it as well. So just doing some thinking and taking a step back, and really, really wise practical steps about not making them nervous, making them feel comfortable. It's so insightful, and I think like a lot of Western teachings could learn from that on how to deal with somebody with autism, because it is about making somebody feel comfortable and helping them to open up, let you into their world, and you do that by thinking how they think. So it's scary to have these big guards. That's thinking from the point of view of the person with ASD. So subhanallah, so much wisdom, and alhamdulillah we have some of it, we can access some of it. But yeah, sorry, sister.
Of course, there are strengths and positives to having an autistic child. What, if you can talk us through the positive aspects of this journey that parents take with their autistic children?
Yeah, so subhanallah, there's hikmah in everything, and Said will understand more than me in this. But everyone has challenges in life. Everyone has a test, and there's so much hikmah. There's things that we don't know. There's things that we do know. So even in that respect, there can be a lot of strengths. They can teach us things. They can, but also not thinking of it all the time as a deficit, as a disease that needs to be cured, but thinking what are the strengths there. So, very famous example, Einstein, he had autism, and actually he contributed a lot to humanity, and he was better because he had autism. So seeing the strengths that those people have, so they have weaknesses in some areas and strengths in other areas. Those strengths can vary. So it could be cognitive, it could be emotional, it could be moral even. So they talk about people with autism maybe being more trustworthy and more moral and better people sometimes. And you could trust them. They want to do right. They would be abhorred if they did something wrong, for example. But also intellectually, you hear about superpowers that some people have. Not everyone has those. But even on a milder level, there's a lot of intellectual strengths and benefits, and so many different aspects. And you can learn so much. We don't know the hikmah of everything, but we can try to understand it, and we see layer upon layer of hikmah and strengths as well.
Thank you. Sayed, of course, we've received a question from a lady who has a child with severe learning disabilities and who cannot communicate, though he is quite older in age. And she says that oftentimes we are told that, you are cursed, or, there is a reason why you are going through this difficulty because you are being punished for something that you did wrong. Um, what is the truth behind this? And is this the right way to view any difficulties that we experience in life? And how can these parents actually help themselves to get through such issues that they face?
Yeah, yeah. I would like to add one more point from Imam Ali's saying. I mean, to Malik Ashtar, you mentioned about the lady mentioning that his child when goes to the public gathering and meeting, and people ask question, whose child is this? Imam Ali picks on this point especially, and he says, when you see these people in the middle of a gathering and a meeting, don't avoid them. Go and sit with them. Try to understand them. Go and sit with them because they need to be understood. They want to you to understand them. So Imam Ali, as a leader, is advising us to who are the centers and who are the people running the centers who could stop these people from entering the centers like this and criticizing them. We should try to provide facilities and make our centers friendly for everyone, even people who are disabled in our society. And yes, what was the question you mentioned? Yeah, regarding the lady.
So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
people who
yeah.
have children like are often told that their children are cursed and they are being
Yeah.
punished.
But it's a wrong way to understand to explain this. Uh, there are verses in Holy Quran. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala very clearly says that I will involve people, including prophets and imams and highest ranking people in the society, in something during their life. This life is not eternal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us to this world for a short period of time. And if this was a place where we could live peacefully without any problem, without any difficulties, prophets and imams were the most deserving people to live their life happily in this world. And when we study the history of Adam to Nuh, Adam to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all of the imams, we see all of them had problems. I have said this many times in my speeches and other interviews that bala in Arabic means involvement, but bala in Urdu, Persian, Punjabi, Turkish, or Gujarati, or any other Muslim country's language means problem, which is a wrong translation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that everybody will go through bala. Bala means everybody will go through some kind of involvement. Being the rich is an involvement. Being not rich is an involvement. Being having a husband is involvement. Having a not having a husband is another kind of involvement. Having children or wife is one kind of involvement. Not having children is another kind of involvement. So every single person in this world will be tested from different means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has very clearly promised. He will test us from wealth. He will test from us from our wife and children and partners. He will test us from giving us position and taking away the position from us. So these kind of problems will exist and cannot be avoided at all in our society. So the best solution is, while we are going through the difficult time of our life, we should pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe, for example, if you have a disabled person you are looking after, pay thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered you as a suitable person to look after this person. And indirectly, you don't know what kind of reward and mercy and benefits on the day of judgment you will get. And there are actually narrations that suddenly you will be presented with so much reward that you will ask, what is this for? And you will be told that this is the reward for your patience in front of difficulties and problems and calamities that you've faced and suffered in this world. I only a few days ago at SI Education Society, I mentioned that look at Prophet Nuh. He was a prophet and he could not convince his own son. When he invited his son to join him in the ark, he said, no, I will go on top of the hill and I will be saved and I will not be drowned. So prophet as a prophet could not convince his son. This proves two things. One, we have the freedom of choice, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely test us, even if we are at the highest position, like Prophet Nuh was, or like Prophet Adam. One of his sons was obedient and another one was different. So this happened to many of the prophets, many of the imams. Some of our imams were killed by their wives. Actually, two of our imams were poisoned by their wives. So what can you say? Some of our imams' brothers and children went against the entire teachings of Shia Islam and declared their own imamat and leadership, and this is how deviation took place in Islam. So problems cannot be avoided. Again, there is a narration from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. He addressed one of his companions in Masjid Kufa and told him, and it is wrong to pray that may Allah not make us suffer or make us go through the involvements in this world. We will all be involved in some kind of issues in our life. We should pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah help us to keep our iman intact, which is the most precious thing that we have. If we come to this world and leave this world with iman, we are successful. Otherwise, we are not successful.
Very beautifully explained there, Sayyid, that not all calamities that we experience in this life are punishments, and also that people should actually thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their blessings, and also be aware that Allah can turn the tables anytime, and they can be put in the shoes of those people who they are criticizing and who they are looking down upon. Dr. Yasmin, we are down to our last 5-10 minutes now. I would like you to explain, how does autism affect the parents when it comes to their own well-being and their self-care? And what are the challenges that they experience, and also how then we as a community can help these parents and the children. So I've given you 2 questions to address, and we are limited in time, so if you can briefly address those, please.
I'll try, inshallah. Parenting of any kind can be challenging, but we say that this adds sometimes extra pressures, not necessarily, but it can do. And so we often recommend specific parenting courses so that they can learn specific techniques that can help make things easier. So if they're not understanding their child or what their child wants or what's upsetting their child, then that's going to cause a lot of opposition, a lot of tantrums, a lot of stress, difficulty and tension in the home, self-harm, violence maybe as well. So kind of understanding their child a bit more, and the little tips on how to parent them. So for example, with autism or ASD, they might hate change or sudden change. So just introducing warnings, for example, or helping them through times of change or transitions, rather than suddenly saying, oh, we're going to go on this day trip today. So if that's something that their child struggles with, just knowing that. So it is all about knowledge and awareness. That's one of the main things, I think. So knowing that, and then they can work with that and try and develop strategies on how to make that easier. So whether it's giving them advance warnings, so saying, okay, next week or in a few days' time, we're going to do this. And also people talk about like visual as well. So that can sometimes help. So if having like a visual timetable or a chart where you put pictures and say, this is what you'll do when, that can also help some kids, not everybody. So it is about finding what works for the child and for the family as well. It is a lot of trial and error, and before they know it, before they realize how to kind of work around it, it can be very difficult and stressful and tiring, and they can get burnout. So what you were saying about self-care is really important, because they always say you have to look after yourself in order to be able to look after others, and people are often quite bad at following that advice because they want to help the other person so much that they forget themselves, and it can be really hard to remember it, and easy to dismiss and say, no, I'm not important, the most important thing is my child. But then if somebody is really burnt out and they don't have much reserve left, then that can impact on the child, either directly or indirectly, either through snapping at them, or they may not realize that they're not able to give so much, they're not able to think as much or to feel as much. Basically, things like underestimate states of sleep. We have guidance as well, and lifestyle. So following those basic things, and just a break as well. Getting support from others. So what you were saying, we can help as a community. In the West, very individualized society, very materialistic, whereas I tried to understand strengths do Eastern societies have, because they have so many difficulties in comparison to the West, but there is sometimes resilience there. So what some people say, it's the community.
Sayed, the sister mentioned burnout of the carers and also tension at home. Sometimes both the parent or the main caregiver are not on the same page communication-wise, or mentally, in looking after the disabled child or a child with special needs. How can what is the Islamic advice for parents when it comes to this, in order to maintain a peaceful home environment, and how to work together in order to develop their families?
Well, I mean, we have a responsibility, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has referred to this in Quran many times, and especially He has addressed the people who have received prophets, saying that the responsibilities that we have given to you will be questioned on the day of judgment. Unfortunately, we translate or interpret this to some basic things, but responsibilities are towards every single issue of the society. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask questions about environment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask questions about our personal life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask question about uh, oppressing ourselves. I mean, if somebody commits a sin, he is actually first oppressing himself and then oppressing someone else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to leave anyone alone. And the verses are very clear in Holy Quran. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran says, فَلَا نسألن الذين أرسل إليهم. Any nation, and we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent 124,000 prophets, which makes it clear that he did not leave a nation in the world without a prophet and a guide. So every single nation of the world will be questioned about their responsibilities and duties, which includes everything. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran says, وَقِفُوهُمْ إِنَّهُمْ مَسْئُولُونَ. Every single person will be responsible on the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them stop and ask about their responsibility. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam also used to say, Inni mas'ulun wa innakum mas'ul. He used to refer to himself, I as a prophet will not be forgiven. I as a prophet will not be allowed to escape about the responsibilities I have in the society, and you also will not be allowed to escape. So the solution is usikum bitaqwallah fima antum anhu mas'ulun wa ilayhi tasirun. Uh,
Thank
so our responsibility is to adopt piety, adopt precautions, adopt patience, and keep on dealing with the issues in our personal life and in the society that we are living in.
Thank you, Sayed. That's a beautiful conclusion. And Sister Yasmin, we are down to the last 30 seconds now of the program. What is your concluding remark before we wind down?
So to take each person as they are, appreciate their strengths, not just their weaknesses, try to understand what's driving how they're feeling and figure out the best way to interact with them. Try to understand that behavior is a communication. What is that person trying to communicate? What are they feeling that maybe they're not able to express? And that people vary, so everyone's different.
Thank you very much to both my honorable guests, Sayyid Mohammad Radawi and Dr. Yasmin Mohsin. Thank you, dear viewers, for staying with us to the end. Join us again next week for another episode of the Religious Dialogue. Until then, fi amanillah.